Think I'm streaming. Are we live? Receiving content. It says you are live. Sweet.
There you go.
Think it's good.
Cool.
We're hardwired in. We're all good to go. Hey everyone, welcome to the Wise Well Show. Today it is Halloween, so I wish you a happy Halloween, October 31st. Financial Wolf, how you doing? You're the first one on. We are talking today about tenant horror stories and real estate horror stories, construction horror stories, everything under the umbrella of real estate horror stories. This is the one day of the year, guys, where I'm going to talk on this channel specifically about all of the negatives, all of the horror stories, because when you reminisce and you share and a lot of the negative things that can happen that go along with all this profit and cash flow and all the positive things too, if we think about the negative things on a day like Halloween, we can use that as fuel to improve the way that we do things, to improve our process. So if you have some really good tenant horror stories, I can almost guarantee you there was something you could have done differently and you could do differently in the future to ensure that you do not have that exact same problem next time. Almost all of my tenant horror stories were either preventable or there was something I could have done to mitigate the damage. Hey, Patel, how you doing? Jonas, Tommy, Financial Wolf, Michael Chung, Jason, how you doing? Everyone's on. Good to see a lot of the regulars on. Want to hear a horror story? I have homework, but I want to go flip phones and list my phones on eBay. There you go. Apologies again for a bit of my nasal. I got a sickness. My daughter came home from preschool and she brought a sickness with her, and so our whole family is very sick, and I'm trying my best to keep my voice up. So we're going to keep things really short today, guys. We started at around 5:57, so I want to promise that I can go out trick-or-treating with my daughter. I want to honor that promise that I made to her. She's going out as a ladybug. I'm going to go out as a vampire. So it's going to be cool. We're going to have a lot of fun doing that, and I have to go do that a little bit after 6:30. So we've got the next half hour of power sessions related to Q&A, tenant horror stories, real estate horror stories, all that kind of stuff. So drop some questions if you guys want down below. I'm going to start just by sharing some of the stories where I had very terrible experiences in real estate. So one of those experiences, and thank you, Financial Wolf, I really appreciate that. We're at 2,105 subscribers we had earlier. We probably lost a couple. Every time I post a video, I lose a couple, then I gain a bunch more. That's just the nature of YouTube. So I'm very thankful for the whole 2,100 people that are subscribed. I'm so thankful. We're on this journey to 10,000 right now. That was my goal when I set out in the first 6 months to a year. So that's the target. We're now just past 6 months, I think. So it's growing. Things are going very well. I'm trying to be consistent for you guys. Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, dropping content. Sometimes on holidays, I'll drop additional content. I dropped a video this morning. Check it out. It launched, I think, about noon Eastern time, where I talked about going live today at 5:55, 6 p.m. Eastern time instead of 7 p.m. because, again, it is Halloween and family comes first. I talk a lot about the freedom lifestyle in here, and part of that means that I have to be there for my family. And YouTube does take up a lot of time, and so does my business and all of these other things. But the key piece is being able to schedule your time. You need to put in time, say, hey, I'm going to put this time away for my daughter. I'm going to put this time on my calendar for my wife, for my friends. And then everything else will just consume your calendar if you don't block it off. This is what I have found. This has been my personal experience. Hopefully the quality is coming in okay. We made some adjustments this time, so the sound should be a little bit louder. You probably don't want to hear my scratchy, losing my laryngitis going on here. You probably don't want to hear it, but it's coming in hopefully loud and clear. And we should be streaming 1080p. I've got the thing on autofocus, so it should be finding me. Yes, so I will, Michael Chung, last video, I think I talked about increasing rents and some of the strategies around that. Let's do a horror story and then talk about that in further detail. So I had a tenant once who, I believe they're a prostitute, and one of the worst tenants I've ever had, and they could not pay their rent, they fell behind. There were issues with their boyfriend coming, slashing the screens in the windows, breaking into the unit. The unit was in fairly bad disrepair, and they were behind on rent. And there are a number of stories I can think of. One where they propositioned me with their daughter, and then they propositioned me themselves, talking about they were referencing like porn and making some suggestions that there was ways to compensate for the rent. And this person was a bit older, so I would, like, no matter what would I ever be interested in, but like you especially, this was a horror story. I could just, even if you had to go through with that, I couldn't imagine how many people have used this individual. But anyway, long story short, yeah, like this was a real horror story. It was really scary for me. And I was able to evict the tenant after a while, and I took damages of $1,000. I let them out of $500 in rent, and I took damages. They wrote all over the walls, destroyed the floors. They have major water leaks. They didn't report to me. Many things go on. That's a tenant horror story. That's real. That's being in the trenches And the learning point is do really good tenant screening. And at the minute that they're behind on rent, on the second you should end for, most people will give them an extra week. I was one of those people. I thought, you know what? I hear her sob story. She paid me $100 in installments. I'll give her a chance. No, you should put the hammer down on the second and document everything. Send out the N4 notice. Say, hey, look, you're late on your rent. You're going to be evicted in 14 days if you don't pay in full. Go to the tribunal, et cetera, et cetera. These were things I should have done that I didn't do on many different instances. Now I'm very, very astute with that. Now, there are obviously exceptions to the rule, but that's one example of a tenant horror story. I've had floods in basement units. There were horror stories. I once offered a 10-plex, commercial 10-plex. It had a ton of additional revenue sources. So I had a huge sign that brought in $25,000 in annual revenue. This is a six-figure revenue property. So it's a big project, like a seven-figure real estate deal. And we had it already locked up under contract. We just had one condition left on it. And we were going through with the current owner. My agent was outside, and I had a few buddies with me. We went into a unit, and this unit was the grossest unit you've ever seen. Nicotine dripping down the walls, like really Halloween horror-esque. No stove. Stove had been removed from the unit because the person had some mental health issues. They were cooking with like lighters, and I don't know what they were. It was just really bad. And the dirtiest unit, holes in the walls, roaches, all the bad things, which usually that smells like money, right? You can get a really good deal, make a lot of money removing tenants like this and putting better tenants in. I don't like to ever cater to the bottom 25% of tenants. It's just not me. I don't have the energy for the bull crap associated with these tenants and their drama. They'll be calling you all of the time, and it's not worth it because they want to pay below market rents too. They don't pay, they don't want to maintain the unit, and they're a lot of time commitment. So they're all three negative things with those types of tenants typically. It's a generalization, but that's the learning point. Went through this unit, right? And it's like dreary, and there's smoke, and like the smoke is so thick you can barely see. And this guy's walking around in circles. And I'm like, hello, how are you? You know, we're going through the unit here with the owner. He comes in, he says, yeah, they're gonna go through. And the guy says, okay, no problem. I'm gonna be on the patio. He comes back in from the patio, the tenant, and mumbles something to someone else. I had a couple contractors and friends with me, and he mumbled something to them, and I didn't hear it at all. I was in the front of the unit taking a picture, and he's going around, and he says something, and I didn't hear it. I'm going in, I open up a closet door, I open up the bathroom door. There's another door, and I look, and I say, is it okay if I enter? And he says, oh, la, 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 and he keeps talking, like mumbles to himself some like gibberish. I had no idea what he said. I open the door just a crack. Didn't even look in, looking to my friend beside me, and like just looking for a second, and there's like a 60-year-old woman lying naked, spread on the bed. Disgusting. Like the grossest thing I ever saw. For a quick second, looked at me, I was like, oh my God, oh, sorry, whoa, close the door. He goes nuts, runs at me, grabs me by the throat, throws me against the wall, and proceeds to get ready to just destroy me because I've now seen his girlfriend naked, which is something I can never unsee. And this guy literally assaulted me, threw me against a wall. And luckily I had the boys there, and I had a hammer because we've been inspecting some spots outside. I had a hammer in my hand, luckily to defend myself, but we were able to pull him off. So I was actually strangled and thrown against a wall. That is real estate. That is what it's like going through the bottom 25% of properties in London, Ontario. That's a real horror story, and I will never get those images out of my head. Thankfully, I have made a lot of... Okay. Hopefully you guys still heard the story. This scary Halloween story. Are we back on? Can people hear me now? Was it just the battery? Okay. Someone tell me where we were at in the story. You guys heard where he assaulted, took me against the wall. my first tenant landlord assault, it's very common. You get assaulted all the time. Try dropping eviction notices off to someone with mental illness. I can guarantee they're going to start throwing things at you. That's normal. That's the business of property management. Most people don't have the stomach for it, and that's why we clean up, because the iBankers aren't going to come in and do this, right? That's why we get the rate returns that we do, and because of information asymmetry. Yeah, so he threw me against the wall. It was a very dramatic experience. Luckily, I had a hammer to protect myself, but didn't need it because I had a few good, strong guys with me, good friends, that peeled them off. So that was my first ever assault in a unit. I've been verbally assaulted all the time. Like, you'll be verbally assaulted. That's not even a horror story. That's just part of being a landlord, dealing with the bottom 50% of tenants. When you deal with hundreds of people, like we deal with 100 tenants right now in our properties. So imagine if I had over time chase out a tenant on a unit every year, year and a half, 2 years, let's say on average. That means over a 10-year period, I'm gonna deal with 1,000 tenants, 1,000 people. And people sometimes are irrational and crazy, especially when it comes to their housing. So just be prepared. You're gonna deal with this kind of stuff in real estate. Anyway, guys, that is an example of a real horror story. The learning lesson is, make sure you always have guys with you. If I was by myself, could you imagine going through that unit with this crazy, insane person? What I should have also done is had the owner stay in there with me. He didn't want to stand there with the smoke. I should have forced the owner to stay there with me and the agent to stand there with me, because they had the relationship with the tenant. I didn't. And always make sure you have consent before you open each and every door in a unit. You think because you have a showing and because you gave 48 hours notice or 24 hours notice that you're safe. People are irrational, and notice means nothing to a crazy man. So on Halloween, if you found one of those tenants out in the wild, I mean, that'd be scary. I still get the images to this day of some of the things that I've seen in rental units. And let's see, we've got some questions here. Happy Halloween to you guys. Solid question there. Can you explain the process of increasing rents? So talked about tenant horror story. Now I'm going to quickly answer that question about increasing rents. So you can increase rents by the index to inflation, right? So based on the CPI for inflation. So this year I think it's 1.8%. So 1.8% was what you can increase rents by within every 12 months. You should be delivering rent increases each and every year. Landlords who do not deliver rent increases will fall drastically behind. Rents have been increasing at a rate of 5 to 10% per year, and the inflation is nothing. It's below what the rents are going up each year. I buy properties where landlords haven't increased the rent for 9 years. Now I have to get rid of these tenants because they're paying so far below market value. They can't afford for the rents to come up, and you have no way to increase their rents without basically evicting them. So that's why there's all these properties in London that are there's tons of 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms they're renting for $400, $500 a month, stuck at 10 years ago rent prices. And landlords do this because they don't want the hassle or the drama. But truth be told, if you don't do this, you won't have any profit at all. So there's no point. If your game is to not increase rents, as a landlord, you should just sell your properties off and invest in something else, because it's not smart. Or you should hire a property manager to do it for you if you don't have the heart to do it. You need to be increasing rents. I go into my tenants that I really like. If you have a really good tenant who's maybe fixed the unit up really nice, I might say, I'm delivering a rent increase for you, but hey, you know what? Like, John, you're a great tenant, man. I'm going to give you a rent discount equivalent to $20. So every month your rent's gone up $20, but I'm going to give you back $20 each and every month. So I will compensate him $20 each and every month. Then next year I'll raise it another $20. I'll say, John, you're such a good tenant. I'm going to give you $30 off discount, or maybe even the full 40 if he takes care of my grass and my snow. Who knows? I'll pay him back in a separate contract for doing those things. But the nice thing is the lawful rent is increasing. And I can choose to remove the discount whenever I want when things go sour, because they always do. There will always be a time when the best tenants become the worst tenants. 9 out of 10 times when they're moving, they stop caring about the property. Something happens, they lose their job, maybe even something out of their control, right? And you want to have the power. The lawful rent is something you can take to the board. So you want to increase your rent each and every year. Very, very important. If you renovate a unit, you want to apply, you can apply for an above guideline increase. So above 1.8%, you can apply to the board and ask for an additional amount. You could also just agree with the tenant to a new amount and sign something there above the guidelines, assuming the tenant agrees to the said rent. So I've negotiated with tenants before. I said, look, they say, look, the bathroom's disgusting. Can we get a new toilet, new vanity? And I would love a new kitchen. Like, sure, I'll put those things in. You're gonna give me $100 more a month in rent. And they say, that's a deal. So I put out $5,000 out of my pocket. I renovate their unit. They continue to pay me rent while they live there. We work together, come to an arrangement. I get an extra $100 a month in rent. That's the best case scenario. The problem is most of the tenants don't want to pay more rent. They don't want the place to be improved. You want to improve your place. I like to keep my place really nice And that's why I like to get the premium rents. I'd rather have premium tenants that expect premium finishes that pay me premium rents than have places that aren't repaired well, where the tenants expect that to pay as little as they can. They don't pay you any money, so you have no money to renovate. It's just an endless cycle. The properties get deteriorated, and everyone loses a ton of money. Low-income housing sucks. Government housing, subsidized housing doesn't work because those tenants tend to not care about the quality of the unit. They have so many other problems in their lives that they damage and destroy the unit. So that's something to kind of think about. Look at the spider on the wall. Is there a spider on the wall? I see no spider. Swag Lord 420. I do not see any spider on the wall. I think I'm all good. Let me know if there is one. There is a fly flying around I saw a minute ago. He snuck in here. Okay. Oh, I thought your headphones. No, your headphones are all good. Sound's all back. Just because it's saying about throwing in the wall. That's right. What would you do if you couldn't find a tenant for a long time at multiple properties? What are the steps you would take? It's a great question. Fantastic question. That's a horror story, actually. Vacancy is a horror story in and of itself. Losing money we all landlord, right? We all get into real estate investing to make money. And so if you're vacant, you're not making money. And I think the only thing worse than being vacant is having a terrible tenant in a unit, destroying the unit. That's more destructive than vacancy. But vacancy is the second most painful and destructive thing for a landlord's business. And after all, you gotta remember when you're doing real estate investing and you're a landlord, it's a business. Like, I don't deal with these tenants and these problems for free. It's not a hobby. I don't enjoy it. I do it because I make a lot of money doing it, and I make other people money doing it. And that's why we do it. And that's why every landlord does it, is to make money. If you're doing it for charity, I mean, why own the property? Why not just invest in it and give money to people and give it to them as a charity? Why do it through dealing with all this drama and this risk? So, yes, I will go back up, Tommy, I promise. I just skipped a question because I scrolled down. I promise I'll get those questions. So what would I do? It wouldn't happen. Take really good care to take good pictures of the unit. If it needs renovating, you renovate the unit to a standard where it will get rented. If you have like a B or an A-level unit, it will always rent. So it's a non-issue. It just isn't something you need to worry about. A marketed unit, marketed well on the internet, put it out to some people. I guarantee you someone will rent the unit from you. So vacancy is a non-issue. I've actually almost never had vacancy because I work hard to ensure I don't have vacancy. A tenant gives me 30 days notice. I ensure that I have that 30-day window to find a tenant. It would be very, very difficult to not find a tenant in that time, unless I just was not posting it, not responding to all the applications, not putting in any open houses or any effort at all to renting the unit out. Worst case scenario, you could always drop the rent. If you're finding you're not able to rent the unit, it's because it's mispriced or not renovated nice enough for the price you're asking. So you can just drop the price accordingly. Every single real estate deal and every single apartment for rent at a certain price will always sell and will always rent. So it's often either you're portraying not good enough quality for the price you're asking, or you're simply just asking too much for what it is. So I would always start with saying, hey, how can we increase the quality of the pictures, of the listing description? How can we market this property better? What can we do to the renovation of the property to make this property a marketable property? And then, of course, if none of those things work and you're doing all of that well, then of course your price is simply just too high. Property that sits in the market for 6 months and doesn't sell, it's listed too high. Same thing for a rental unit. If it's listed for more than 30 days for rent, the price of the rent is wrong or it's not being marketed properly. That's pretty much it. Okay, I'm gonna go up and get these questions because I promised I would. What's the largest amount you have paid a tenant to get them out? Cash for keys. Tommy, great question. I don't know. I'd have to think on that. I've paid tenants like a first and last month's rent to leave. My general rule of thumb or my calculation for keys for cash is typically between 1 and 6 months differential. Typically between 1 and 3 months differential, depending how bad the tenant is, how destructive they are on the unit, and how out of whack the differential is. So if the unit's rented for $500, let's say, to a tenant, and the market rent is $1,000, there's a $500 differential. Likely the tenant's given first month's and last month's rent deposit. So if it's the second of the month and they just paid their rent for that month, they've given me effectively prepaid rent for the month, plus they have a last month's rent. So they've already given me $1,000. I'll offer them at that same day, I'll say, if you can get out, the next week, for instance, I can hand you right now $1,500 cash or $2,000 cash. And that's probably the most I've ever given a tenant ever. I've always been able to negotiate better deals than that with my tenants, and people are pretty reasonable. The differential between market and current rent is $500. So I would say the differential in 3 months, I'll get the differential back. So in 3 months, I'll make $1,500 more by having them out for those 3 months. So I can offer them $1,500. I've heard landlords argue and investors tell me that they pay up to a year differential. So if a tenant is paying $500, market rent is $1,000. I've heard landlords offer $6,000 cash plus last month's rent. So $6,500, no problem to get a tenant out. They get their money back in 1 year. The ROI on that money you've just paid to get that tenant out is fantastic, especially if the tenant is causing destruction to the unit. Because not only are you getting the differential in rent, but you're also saving on that destruction or those extra utilities that tenant or family is using. So it can be very, very good to get bad tenants out, especially ones where you're paying all the utilities. I've done that too, where I've switched it over and had the tenant start paying the utilities when I got the old tenant out, and that added to my differential gain. And so the ROI is fantastic. You're getting your money back in 3 months, right, that you just gave the tenant. That's a 33% return on investment. That's fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that. Plus, the minute you get that bad tenant out and the new tenant in, the property value based on the NOI income approach just shot up $25,000 to $50,000. So $500 more a month in rent should get you $50,000 more on average in sale price. So getting in a triplex, 3 of those types of tenants out, you can unlock 150 grand in value just by getting these bad tenants out and then marketing this property with a better market value, not net operating income or NOI. Okay, is there any way to get bad tenants out during winter, considering how much favoritism there is to the tenants from a legal perspective? So that's not actually true. I talked to the sheriff. I have a bit of a relationship talking with the sheriff. We just evicted a tenant with an eviction order on the door, and the sheriff came. We had to change the locks. It's my first time actually really using a sheriff. I got an eviction orders before, but the tenants would get the notice posted on their door that 7 days the sheriff's coming, and they would just skedaddle right before the sheriff gets there. We actually paid the $335 and had the sheriff had to show up and actually evacuate, and they left all their stuff behind. It's a terrible, terrible situation for us because we're stuck with $1,000 to remove all their stuff and then all the cleanup. It really is a terrible situation because we're not going to get a dime from these broke tenants, unfortunately. It's just the nature of the business. We inherited this tenant. I didn't place them. They came with the property. So it's part of the value add proposition that we put in the plan when we bought the property a year ago. In those situations, the sheriff said it's not true that they won't kick tenants out in the winter. That's not true. There are shelters in London, and there are places for men and for women and for families where they can go if they don't have a place to live. So it's not like they're going to be on the street. That just doesn't happen in Ontario, in Canada. It's just not a thing. There are places they can go. So there is no, an adjudicator won't say, I'm not going to evict them because it's the winter. A sheriff won't say, hey, I won't execute this order because it's the winter. That's a non-thing. In Ontario, that's just not a thing. How do you document your tenants? Using Excel? Yes, I do. So I track all inflows and outflows using Excel or Google Sheets if it's a shared property, so we can all have access to that. I have my tenant's name written down, and then I have a tab for each property, right? And each property I have a unit on a line on a row in Excel, and I have the name of the tenant and their unit, and then I have the rent paid, it's expected, and then each and every month, January, February, March, I write in as I get the rent paid on the second, boom, $500, put it in. As I collect that e-transfer, as that money goes in, I got to record that because when you're dealing with, we probably have 100 tenants, I would say right about now, about 100 tenants. So that's a lot of names to remember. I remember everyone. If I see them, I know their name. But off the top of my head, you could ask me to list my 100 tenants' names. I couldn't. And as we get bigger and bigger, it's going to be more and more difficult for us to do that. So that's why it's really important to document everything because the brain, even someone who has a really sharp memory, can't remember everything. It's just impossible. I have trouble remembering our 35 properties. If you asked me to write them all down right now, I could. It would just take me a while to think through where every property is. But if I saw the list, I would know immediately, right? And so that's why we document and list everything. Okay. Scrolling down. Do you have high rent prices when you post ads on? Do you highball rent prices when you post ads on Kijiji? Yeah. So my strategy has always been to do a really good job marketing, the best job you possibly can. And I like to start at a ceiling, and then if I don't get any responses, based on the number of responses I get to the ad, I know I need to make modifications, typically to the price. I'll always start at the highest possible rent I think that I can get and lower from there. Oftentimes I'll negotiate with a tenant. I'll post maybe a unit for $1,800 when I know it's worth $1,600, and we'll negotiate part way down. Now the challenge with that is you cut out the really good quality tenants because the quality tenants tend to be very price sensitive. It's the ODSP, the Ontario Disability, the mentally retarded and the on welfare and the social assistance. those tenants don't even pay their rent. The government pays it for them. So those tenants tend to be the least sensitive to price. And so at a certain price, like a really high price, I can get $800 a bedroom right now in London, Ontario, if I put ODSP, bad tenants in, right? I put tenants that have like real issues in. They'll pay higher rents, and you basically just get more damage, more utility usages, more stress and hassle dealing with these people. But you could crank out way higher rents. Like people tell me market rent is X. There is no X. Like there's a range of market rents. A bedroom rents for anywhere from between 400 and 800. And that's the fact in London, depending on the quality of tenant that you want to attract, depending on the quality of the renovation of the property, depending on a number of factors, right? So you can get a huge range in what rents can be, and it kind of depends on how much stress you want to take on. When I have 2 or 3 properties, I might even rent by the bedroom to get more rent to tenants individually, right? Or stuff like that to get increased rent premiums above market rent, and I'll deal with the headaches and the hassles associated with that. Now that you have a bigger portfolio, I don't care as much about those individual, cranking out an extra $20 in rent. The headache is not worth it. The damage to the property likely isn't worth it. So you sort of learn as you go, right? Happy Halloween, Fayez. Are you afraid of inhaling asbestos or other toxic particles when you DIY renos? Yes. Wear a mask and wear glasses and wear gloves. I've inhaled way too much, and that's because I was just being stupid and bullheaded and young, thinking I could do it all myself. I don't do any of the renovations myself anymore, guys. Like, it's not me down there doing any renovation. I'll stop in on a job site. I'm renovating my own basement now with the help of a few contractors, but I often, at all my job sites, I'm not the one doing the work anymore. I oversee it all. I make sure that it's done properly, but I'm not the one doing it anymore. I'll have to walk on site for only a few minutes to overlook and make sure that things are following according to plan. I'm general contractor, not working. Aiden, look at that super chat. Woo! We're going to Vegas in 10 days. Yes, everyone. The real estate mastermind in Vegas. Really excited for that. And then going to California after that. I guess I have to go now. We have 5 more minutes till we have to go trick-or-treating. So I'm going to wrap this up really quick. Rick, I did some videos on Instagram and Facebook. And the video I dropped this morning, I talked about doing trick-or-treating, guys. So unfortunately, if people are tuning in at 7 o'clock, they're going to catch the replay. Because I'm going trick-or-treating with my daughter, and family time is number 1. So we did 5:55 to 6:35, so 40-minute segment. Sorry, guys. Got a cold. Fighting through it. Yeah, I mean, it's just the nature of things. You do take in some toxic particles, and you do your best to wear good masks that sort of stop it all. I'll talk to Elise to see if we can. We're all feeling really sick. Emma's sick, I'm sick, and Elisa's sick. So we're trying to just do Halloween around the block here. Maybe we might end up making it. Ellie, how you doing? Rick, good to see you on. Yeah, like I said, we did change things. If I can prove that I have the funds to outright buy a property, could I get a mortgage on that property without having a job? Potentially. Depends on which lender you go to. It depends on a number of different factors. The CRA has kind of put out a mandate from the federal government that they don't want to lend to people without income, especially entrepreneurs. I don't know why. Like, it's getting very difficult for myself to do that. What I would say is go to a credit union, because credit unions can make exceptions that big banks can't in Canada. They have there's provincial and federal regulation. Banks are regulated federally. Credit unions are regulated provincially, I believe, is my understanding. So they have different sets of regulations. The stress test rules don't apply to credit unions, by the way. Everyone's talking about the stress test rules in Ontario and Canada. They don't apply to credit unions. They can make exceptions. The same is true to B lenders. So B lenders right now will lend you at 4.5% or 4.79% all day based on equity, based on assets. And they don't have to have the same strict regulation for income testing big banks do. So you can definitely get a mortgage, just won't be the cheapest rate mortgage you could possibly get. Okay. Hey, no problem, Michael Chung. No problem, guys. I'm feeling very sick too, so I'm trying to keep this one short. If there are no more questions, check out the video I dropped this morning. Is Tenant Horror Stories with Renee Mass. Renee Mass is a great guy. You're going to see two more videos I have with him. His story in Kingston, Ontario. Really inspirational story. He talks about student rentals specifically. And yeah, it's going to be great for you guys to see those videos. Hope you get a lot from them. And the video this morning, if you want to learn more about horror stories, the floor fell through on one of his properties. He shared the story. And we've had issues. I've been bribed. I've been blackmailed. I've been extorted by contractors. I've got contractor horror stories a mile long. Theft, stealing, tens of thousands of dollars. A contractor put my wife into labor, came while I was at work, and showed up at the door and said, I'm taking you to the bank right now and you're paying me $4,000. And he hadn't done any of the work. and she was forced into duress. It was a whole situation. The scum of the earth tend to be Kijiji contractors. Unfortunately, a good bottom quarter of them are just scam artists, and so you got to be very, very careful getting contractors that you haven't properly vetted. So make sure you check references. Or I only work with people who are referred to me now. I just don't work with people off the internet. I don't trust them unless I have really good referrals. So I have a big enough network now I can do that. But in the beginning, I had to go through and burn through some bad contractors. So I had lots of horror stories. Yeah, Fayez, you don't want me to come to your house. I'm very sick. I'm sick, and Elise is sick too. So, and you put a property in a friend's name so you can keep getting more mortgages, or is that illegal? No, it's totally fine. What you do is you joint venture. You put it in their name, and then you take half of the joint venture agreement, and you split the profit on your T776. For tax purposes, you'll take half the income as a joint venture partner, but to the bank and on title, one person's on. That's how I do all of my joint venture partnerships, all of the properties that we buy together. We're buying a property a week. My investors are buying the properties. Each of my investors buy 5 to 10 properties. They get the really good interest rates, and I sort of partner with them, right? And so I get to take advantage of the fact that they have really good income to qualify for these mortgages, and they're not maxed out. So that's definitely something that have fun fighting for those candies with the fat kids, Mike. Love that. That's a good one. Thank you, Jason. Yeah. So yeah, that's something you can definitely do. I'd recommend that. If you're worried about joint venturing, you could do something like you put them 10% on title, and their income gets thrown in to the pot. Even 1% on title, 99% you on title. They can then qualify for mortgages, and their income gets thrown in. So you could have an uncle or an aunt or a parent or a friend who works at Facebook and makes 150 grand a year. They don't even have to co-sign. They're on title 1%, and they only on the deal 1% of profit, but they can get you a full mortgage. So that's something you can do when you look in joint venture. They're sick too, Fayez, so you probably don't want to see them either. They gave me this sickness. Anyway, guys, I really have to go. It's 6:32. I promised I'd be done around 6:30. So today's Wise Wealth Show is done. I'm sorry we didn't do a live deal analysis. Interestingly, last week's property, 2003, I think it was Royal Crescent, ended up selling 10,000 over ask for about $105,000. I had some friends that went through the property and a contractor, and they told me about some of the costs associated. And I would assume that property needed about $60,000 renovation. So there was almost no margin there, but still was actually a little bit of a deal. You could make about 20 grand. Depending if you did the work yourself, you could save quite a bit of money. So there you go, guys. Real update from last week's deal analysis. Maybe next week we'll do another live deal analysis. And stay tuned because we have more content dropping Friday, Monday, and then next Wednesday, of course, as well. And really excited. Like Aiden said, you saw in his super chat, Vegas, the real estate experience is, the real estate mastermind is going to be a great experience. And then I'm going to get in a car and we're going to drive from Vegas with Max, probably Aiden and myself. We're going to drive to LA, hopefully meet up with maybe Graham and also meet Kevin if you follow his channel, Graham Stefan, and meet Kevin Patha. Anyway, so might be doing some other cool things in California. If you guys someone on my channel lives in California, someone on my channel lives in Vegas, we should meet up because that's a cool opportunity. Send me a DM on Instagram at Mike Rosehart or on Facebook at Mike Rosehart. So I'll see you guys all on next week for the Wise Wealth Show, and I'll see you all in the comments. Bye, guys. Happy Halloween! See you guys. Happy Halloween. Stop recording.